All right. Welcome to another narration of mine. Settle in for a moment. This is where the voices I carry meet the version of the truth most people avoid, and where the things we uncover tend to stay with us long after the story ends. Only the brave souls and the fearless ones stay until the end. I never meant for any of this to follow me into the quiet hours of my life. I never meant to stain my hands with anything darker than the usual mistakes people make when they're young and reaching for things they shouldn't touch. But I kept reaching anyway. It started last winter, during one of those weeks when everything feels a little too thin. Sleep, patience, sanity. I was drifting, aimless, restless, spending most nights in a sagging old basement I rented with 2 friends. The place always felt as if it exhaled cold from the walls, whispering through the pipes. My friend, I'll call him Marcus, used to laugh about it, saying the air tasted like old stones and burned wires. He liked to push limits. I liked to watch him. Maybe that was the first mistake. One night, he brought home a box he bought from a yard sale across town. It was scratched, warped, tied shut, with a cord that looked older than the woman who sold it to him. The cord itself seemed to clutch the wood like it didn't want to let go. "Let's open it downstairs," he said, grinning. The basement light flickered above us as he tugged the cord loose. The box breathed out a faint smell of herbs and something metallic. Inside was a cluster of things that looked like they belonged in someone else's memories. Tiny cloth scraps, dried flowers twisted together, a vial of dust the color of storm clouds. There was also a notebook with wavering handwriting I could barely read. Marcus read it out loud anyway. He always read things out loud, as if the walls needed to hear too. Most of it was nonsense. Ritual steps written like poetry, warnings scribbled in the margins, symbols repeating themselves like someone was trying to remember how to draw them. But he laughed through it, calling it creepy decoration stuff. I didn't laugh. Some things felt too heavy to joke about. We kept that box on an old shelf down there, right next to the tools we never used. I'd catch myself staring at it during the nights when sleep stayed far from me, the basement humming softly, with its familiar, strange quiet. And something in me, something bored, something lonely, started picking through the notebook on my own. Not because I believed in magic, not because I wanted anything from it, but because the handwriting felt frantic, like the words were reaching out. The notebook talked about sympathetic bindings, about shaping cloth and thread into a vessel that mirrored a person. A doll not meant for comfort, but for focus. An echo of a body, a container for what someone believed about another person. I didn't understand half of it, but the half I understood felt like crossing a line, even by reading it. I never expected Marcus to give me a reason to try any of it. He had been spiraling for months, lying, stirring tension in the house, mocking people's insecurities just to feel larger than he was. He pushed it too far one night, saying something cruel about a friend of mine who didn't deserve it. I told him to stop. He smirked, like he was proud of himself. I walked downstairs alone afterward. The notebook waited. There are moments in life where you feel yourself stepping toward something wrong, but you move anyway, as if pulled by a thread you didn't tie. I felt that as I pulled the box onto the floor, as I chose a scrap of cloth that matched the color of Marcus's old hoodie, as I shaped something that resembled him only in outline. The notebook said a doll didn't need to look perfect, just recognized. I didn't use anything dangerous, just thread, cloth, a strand of his hair from the couch cushion, things that felt too small to matter. But as I tied the final knot, the room felt different. Its cold shifted into an almost listening stillness, as if the air leaned closer. I whispered his name, not with fury, not with any twisted wish, just with the tired, aching frustration of wanting him to care about the people he hurt. I pressed my thumb against the doll's shoulder. Light pressure. Barely anything. Upstairs, something crashed, loud enough to jolt me upright. I ran upstairs and found Marcus on the kitchen floor, sunk forward, breathing hard. His right shoulder dropped at an unnatural angle beneath the fabric of his sweatshirt. "It just popped," he muttered, confused, shaken, trying to laugh it off. "Just bad luck." I slipped. I didn't believe him, and I didn't understand what I had actually done. But that night, the basement felt different when I went back down. Not colder, just expectant, as if something had awakened and now watched with patient interest. I told myself to stop. I told myself the coincidence meant nothing. But curiosity has its own hunger, and something in that basement wanted me to feed it. After Marcus's shoulder got wrecked, things changed around the house, but no one said anything about it. Not directly. He didn't go to the hospital, just sat in his room all week, like he was waiting for the pain to leave on its own. He kept rotating it like it was jammed, and sometimes I'd hear this dry, grinding sound when he moved too fast, like bone dragging across bone. The weird thing is, I kept the doll. I didn't throw it out, didn't burn it, didn't even bury it like the notebook suggested. It sat in a shoebox under my bed, wrapped in an old beanie, still faintly holding his scent. I thought about it way more than I should have, like a part of my brain wouldn't stop circling back to it, tapping on the idea like a sore tooth. I wasn't even sure if it was guilt. It was something else, like I'd touched something real, something I wasn't supposed to be able to touch. A few days after the shoulder thing, Marcus started acting different, not quieter, not nicer, just twitchy. He started locking his bedroom door, even when he was home alone. I'd see him watching me sometimes, not in a what's up kind of way, more like he was trying to figure out if I knew something. I started keeping my distance, mostly because I didn't trust myself. One night, I came home late, and he was in the living room with my other roommate, Zach. They were watching something stupid and laughing. But when I walked in, Marcus froze, like he'd been mid-sentence and forgot how to finish it. His eyes just stuck to me. He didn't say anything, just got up and went to his room. Didn't come out the rest of the night. I went to bed with this thudding in my chest that wouldn't go away. And I swear I could hear movement above me when I laid down. His room was right over mine. Not walking, not pacing, just these slow, dragging sounds, like he was inching his mattress across the floor or something. That night, I had a dream. Or maybe it wasn't a dream. I don't really know anymore. I was back in the basement. Only the light wasn't on, but I could still see everything. I was sitting on the floor, shoebox open, and the doll was in my hand. Except it wasn't cloth anymore. It had skin. It looked like wax, but softer, warm, almost breathing. I pushed my thumb into its stomach, and it caved in too easily, like rotten fruit. There was something wet inside. I pulled my hand back, and there was blood on my thumb. Real blood, sticky and dark. And then I woke up. I was freezing. My sheets were soaked in sweat, and my hand was still curled in the same position as in the dream. I ran to the bathroom and flicked on the light. There was nothing on me. No blood. But the skin under my nails smelled like rust. I don't care what anyone says. That wasn't a dream. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Just sat in bed, listening for movement upstairs. And I swear, at some point, I heard him whimpering. Not talking, not groaning, just soft little broken sounds, like he was trying to cry without making a noise. In the morning, I checked the doll. Still cloth, still crude, still wrapped in that beanie. But the thread around the stomach was gone. I didn't tell anyone. Why would I? No one believes this kind of stuff unless they see it. And even then, they lie to themselves because it's easier than admitting the world might be bigger and uglier than we understand. A few nights later, Zach told me he was worried about Marcus. He's not eating, keeps muttering to himself, says he's having blackouts. Blackouts. That stuck with me. I went back to the basement the next night, pulled the box down again, flipped through the notebook under the dim orange glow of that crusty old bulb. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop. The further I went, the more detailed it got. The author had tried things, documented them, what worked, what didn't. There were pages scratched out so hard the paper tore. Some were covered in symbols, some in what looked like fingernail gouges. And then I found this section about internal disruption. It talked about binding pain into the doll through sharp implements. Not stabbing, not piercing, just pressing. Pressure. Enough to warp the link. I knew it was insane. I did it anyway. I found a thumbtack on my desk, small and silver. I brought it down to the basement with the doll in my hand and pushed it straight into the cloth where the spine would be. I didn't twist it. I didn't drive it in hard, just held it there. And then the house groaned, like something huge was shifting in the walls. I froze. Upstairs, I heard the distinct crack of something hitting the floor. Not a stumble, not a dropped object. It was the sound of wood snapping. I ran up. Zach was standing in the hallway outside Marcus's door, pale as hell. "He fell," Zach whispered. "I think he fell. I heard something. Man, I don't know. I think he broke something." We opened the door together. Marcus was on the floor, face down, hands shaking. His shirt was soaked down the back with sweat, and when we rolled him over, he looked different. There was blood coming out of his nose. His eyes were glassy, and his back was arched wrong. Not broken, just wrong. He didn't go to the hospital that time either. He refused. He told Zach he just pulled something. But I saw him later that night in the hallway mirror. I was brushing my teeth, and he walked behind me, barefoot, shirtless, and I caught a glimpse of his back. There was a line of purple swelling down his spine, almost too perfect, like someone had traced it with a ruler. The thumbtack was still in the doll. I left it there. I kept waiting for someone in the house to name what was happening, to point at the growing tension and drag it into the light. But nobody did. Silence has a way of spreading through a place, settling in the corners first, then creeping across the floorboards until the whole space feels wrapped in it. We moved through rooms like strangers passing at midnight, careful not to touch anything that might stir whatever waited beneath the surface. Marcus barely came out of his room after the fall. When he did, he walked like his body was stiffening from the inside, like his joints weren't obeying the rest of him. His steps didn't land right. They felt out of rhythm, as if he was listening to a beat only he could hear, one that didn't belong in a human pattern. Zach tried to check on him more than I did. I'd hear quiet knocks on Marcus's door, soft coaxing, little pauses after a question, followed by the door closing again when Marcus refused to answer. Some nights, Zach lingered in the hall after trying, as if he didn't know what to do once he realized he couldn't help. I kept my distance, but not out of fear of Marcus. I was afraid of the shoebox under my bed. The doll didn't feel like a harmless object anymore. Whenever I passed near my room, it was as if a faint heaviness pressed against my ribs. Nothing physical, just a steady reminder that I'd started something I didn't really understand. One night, I heard Marcus in the kitchen. The sounds didn't match the place. Slow thuds, uneven scraping against the countertop, the soft clink of a cabinet that wasn't being opened normally. I stayed in the hallway, listening. It felt wrong to step inside, like walking into a scene that wasn't meant to include me. When the noises stopped suddenly, I stepped forward. The kitchen light flickered quietly, the room still. Marcus was standing near the sink, back to me, his shoulders slanted, as if pulled downward by something heavy. His arms hung strangely at his sides, not resting, not tense, just suspended. "Marcus," I said. His head lifted, but he didn't turn all the way, just enough for me to see a piece of his face in the yellow light. Something in his expression changed too slowly, like it had to drift up from somewhere deep inside him. "I lost track of time," he murmured. That was it? No explanation, no complaint, not even the uneasy attempt at humor he always tried before. Just that quiet line, spoken flat, and then he walked past me, as if I was a shadow against the wall. I stood there for a long moment afterward. The sink was dripping steadily, each drop landing with a hollow tap that felt like it echoed inside my chest. I checked the cabinets and found nothing out of place, but the air smelled faintly of old metal and something sharp, the kind of scent that doesn't come from anything in a normal kitchen. Later that night, I sat on my bed with the shoebox in my lap. I didn't open it immediately. I held it like someone holds an old letter, torn between fear and curiosity. The more I thought about the notebook in the basement, the more I noticed how my mind kept drifting back to the last pages I hadn't read, the ones covered in strange, overlapping lines that almost formed shapes if you stared long enough. After a long breath, I opened the shoebox. The doll looked exactly the same as before, but seeing it again made my hands feel unsteady. The thread across its back was still tight. The fabric was worn where I'd handled it too often, but there was something different in the way it rested in the box, like it was waiting for me to move it. I didn't touch it. I closed the box carefully and placed it back under my bed, making sure the lid aligned perfectly, as though even the smallest slip could set something off. That same night, I woke to a sound I didn't understand at first. A soft dragging noise, slow, deliberate, moving across the hallway outside my room. The kind of sound that brings a weight with it, as if something is testing the floor with each shift. I sat up, heartbeat thick in my throat, listening closely. It stopped right outside my door. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then came a soft scrape, something brushing against the wood. Not knocking, not trying to come in, just tracing the door's surface with the careful curiosity of someone learning the outline of a shape in the dark. I didn't open it. I couldn't. The scraping stopped after a minute, replaced by faint, shuffling steps moving away. I waited until the house settled again before I stood up and opened the door. The hallway was empty, silent, still. But at the base of Marcus's bedroom door, I saw marks, thin, wavering lines, like someone had dragged their fingers back and forth against the wood, testing pressure, testing shape. The next morning, I found Zach sitting at the table with his hands clasped together like he was holding on to his own nerves. He didn't look at me when I walked in. "He talked in his sleep last night," he said. It didn't sound like him. I didn't answer. I just stared at the spot on the floor where the linoleum curled up at the edge, feeling the edges of my thoughts pull tighter. Marcus entered the kitchen a few minutes later, moving slower than the day before. He glanced at us both, then reached into the fridge with a stiff, wavering motion like his arm wasn't entirely connected to the thought behind it. He didn't say anything, didn't acknowledge the tension, just stood there with the fridge still open, staring at nothing. Something in him was drifting, and something in the house was drifting with him. That evening, I knew I had to go back down to the basement. Not to fix anything, but because the notebook wasn't finished telling its story. What I didn't know then was that the next thing I'd read would take everything even further from where it had started, and closer to something I wasn't sure I could pull away from. I don't know why I kept going back to that basement. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It felt more like being drawn toward a place that remembered me. The house above always felt cramped, but the basement felt stretched thin, like the air was holding its breath, waiting for me to cross that last step. When I reached the bottom, the bulb flickered softly, bathing everything in its dull orange haze. The notebook lay exactly where I'd left it, closed, undisturbed, patient. I picked it up with both hands and sat on the cold floor, letting the silence settle around me. The pages I'd stopped at before were covered in shapes I never understood. But below those, the handwriting returned, different from the earlier entries, shakier, rushed, like whoever wrote them didn't have control over their own hand anymore. There was a line at the top of the page that made my breath catch. When the vessel begins to drift, the mind may slip behind it. I didn't know what that meant, not at first, but the next sentences made something heavy coil inside me. If the connection strengthens beyond the initial breach, the form you created may start pulling instead of receiving. You'll feel it when the one you've bound begins to lose himself. I thought of Marcus standing in the kitchen, staring at nothing for minutes at a time. I thought of the scrape at my door. I thought of how his movements had lost their rhythm. There was more. If the drift deepens, the bound one begins echoing the vessel instead of the other way around. Echoing the vessel. I set the notebook down, feeling my hands tighten. The doll in the shoebox was crude, barely shaped. Nothing about it looked like a real person. But the idea that Marcus could be slipping toward that, toward something empty, something unfinished, hit me with a coldness that pressed into my lungs. I stood up and paced slowly across the basement, trying to force my thoughts into something rational. But the room felt different again, like it was leaning closer, listening not to the pages, but to me. Eventually, I returned to the notebook and flipped further. The ink grew darker, the pen strokes heavier. Someone had been writing faster, harder. One section near the end caught my attention. The heading wasn't clear, but the lines below were more frantic, almost torn into the page. Do not let the vessel deepen its hold. It does not stay still when the link stabilizes. It studies. It adapts. And once it starts taking shape, the bound one begins to mirror. I didn't want to picture what that meant, but a memory slipped in anyway. Marcus standing in the hallway, head tilted the same angle the doll naturally slumped when I first tied its arms. The notebook continued. If the shift reaches the final stage, the bound one may lose the ability to recognize familiar faces. His body may continue moving, but something else will be beneath it. I closed the notebook. I didn't want to read anymore right then. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I believed it too much. When I got upstairs, the house felt wrong in a new way. The air was dense, like walking into a room moments after a fight. Not the sound, just the residue of something unsettled. Zach wasn't home yet. His room was dark, his jacket missing from its hook. But at Marcus's door, the door was slightly open for the first time in days. I stepped closer, careful, slow, and peered inside. His room looked untouched, bed unmade, blinds closed, the faint smell of dust and stale air drifting through the doorway. But he wasn't in there. Not sitting, not sleeping, not hiding. That should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like the quiet before a storm. I checked the living room next. Empty. Then the bathroom. Also empty. When I turned back toward the hallway, something shifted in the corner of my vision. A slow, subtle movement from the end of the corridor, half in shadow. My breath stalled without meaning to. It was Marcus. He was standing there, motionless, but not with the stillness of someone waiting. It was the stillness of something pausing mid-thought, as if reassessing its place in the room. He wasn't facing me. He was facing the wall, forehead almost touching it, his arms hanging straight at his sides. "Marcus?" I asked quietly. He didn't react, didn't turn, didn't breathe in a normal rhythm. I took half a step forward, then froze. His hand twitched. Not a normal twitch. This was a sharp, small movement, like a puppet string being tugged once from above. Another twitch followed, then another, each slightly more controlled than the last, until his arm lifted by a fraction of an inch. Slow, jerking, unnatural. I backed away, my heel brushing against the wall. He finally spoke, but his voice was too soft, too calm, as if he had to remember how to form each word. "Are you still there?" The question didn't make sense, and the way he asked it didn't feel like he was talking to me. It felt like he was talking to something else. He didn't lift his head, didn't move his feet, just stood there, breathing too slowly, waiting for an answer from somewhere I couldn't see. Before I could say anything, Zach's key turned in the front door. The noise snapped the moment apart like breaking glass. Marcus's head jerked, not fluidly, not humanly, and he hurried back into his room, shutting the door with a soft click. I stood in the hallway, still trying to understand what I'd just seen. Zach walked in, tired, oblivious. He dropped his keys on the table and asked if everyone was home. I didn't answer, because in that moment, I wasn't sure if everyone was. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat awake with the shoebox beside me, trying to decide whether opening it would make things better or to make them unravel faster. I didn't open it. But the whole time, the air in my room felt heavier, as if whatever I'd started was no longer waiting for my permission to move forward. The next day began the same way every bad day does. Quiet, flat, and carrying that strange pressure just beneath the surface. I walked through the house slowly, listening for anything unusual. Everything looked normal at first glance, but the rooms felt tense. The kind of tense that makes you check behind you, even when you know no one's there. I avoided the basement. I avoided Marcus's room. I avoided the shoebox until I realized avoiding it wasn't going to keep anything from happening. By early evening, Zach had gone out again, leaving the house dim and soft, with shadows. I sat on the edge of my bed with the shoebox in my lap, waiting for some tiny push inside me to make a decision. For a long while, I just held it, like it weighed more than cardboard and cloth. Then something happened. Something so slight, I almost could have dismissed it. A faint sound came from the hallway. Not a step, not a voice, just a tiny shift of the floorboards, as if someone leaned forward and put weight down too gently. I stood up, shoebox still in my hands, and walked out to the hallway. Marcus's door was open again, this time a little wider. Inside, I could see him sitting on the floor, with his back against the bed, legs stretched out, arms resting at his sides. His head was lowered, chin against his chest. It looked like he'd fallen asleep, sitting upright. Only he wasn't asleep. Something was off immediately. The angle of his shoulders, the slight tilt of his neck. Everything looked arranged, not natural. Like he'd been placed there, not settled there on his own. "Marcus?" I said softly. No reaction. Not a flinch. Not even a shift. I stepped closer, shoebox in hand, and the floor creaked under me. Then he did something I still can't explain. Without lifting his head, without moving his arms, without adjusting any part of his posture, he stood, straight up, from the floor to standing. No transition, no push, just rising, like the space between sitting and standing didn't exist for him anymore. He turned toward me in a slow pivot, his feet not shifting naturally, more like they were being reminded where to go. His face was pale, his expression blank, but there was something behind his eyes, something faint, something watching me from far away. "I need to check something," he whispered. His voice didn't sound like it was meant for me. It sounded like he was repeating something he had been told to say. Then his gaze drifted to the shoebox in my hands. In that moment, I felt something subtle, a pressure, not physical, but unmistakable, pulling between the box and him, like a thread stretched tight, vibrating. I took a step backward into the hallway. He followed. Not fast, not slow, just inevitable. "Marcus," I said again, louder this time. He blinked once, only once, and it didn't look voluntary. My chest tightened. I didn't know what was left of him inside, whatever he'd become, but something about the way he watched the box made it clear. Whatever link formed between him and that doll wasn't waiting for me anymore. He stepped closer, and I finally understood the notebook's last warning. Not because I read it, but because I saw it in front of me. The vessel takes shape when the bound one loses theirs. His posture, his movements, his change. He wasn't mirroring himself anymore. He was mirroring the doll. I backed into my room, quickly, and shut the door, sliding the lock with shaking fingers. His footsteps reached the door a moment later. Soft, uneven, like he was testing how hard to press. A quiet moment passed. Then another sound followed, barely audible, almost tender. He brushed his fingers against the door, the same slow way something had traced it nights before. "Open it," he murmured. The voice was low, almost coaxing, but underneath it was a dull flatness, like someone reading instructions off a page. He pressed his hand against the wood, and the pressure felt wrong, too steady, too rehearsed. I held the shoebox tighter. Something inside me snapped then. Not fear, not panic, just a sudden understanding that I had run out of time. Whatever was left of Marcus was slipping deeper, and whatever was pulling him wanted the box. It wanted the doll. And I didn't know what it would do if it got it. I didn't unlock the door. I didn't speak. I didn't move. Eventually, the pressure at the door faded. His footsteps drifted down the hall, slow and uncoordinated, until even the faintest creak stopped. I stayed awake until sunrise, shoebox beside me, listening for any sign of him. When morning finally came, the house felt still again. Too still. I walked out into the hallway, and his door was open. His room was empty. Every trace of him gone. Clothes, wallet, pillow, everything. Like he walked out the front door and never looked back. Zach called everyone he knew. No one had seen him. No one heard from him. No calls, no messages, nothing. He was simply no longer there. I didn't tell Zach about the doll, or the notebook, or the hallway. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. Instead, I put the shoebox in a cabinet high above the pantry, wedged behind old baking pans no one ever touched. I stopped going near the basement. I stopped opening my bedroom window at night. I started checking the locks twice before bed. It's been months. The house is quiet now. Zach moved out. I barely sleep. And sometimes, so faint, I could almost dismiss it. I hear something shift in the cabinet above the pantry. Something small. Something waiting. I don't open it anymore. But I think, in the dark, whatever is still inside the box knows I will eventually have to. And when that day comes, I'm terrified the shape standing on the other side of the door won't be someone I recognize, but the thing he became.